All right, well, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Entrepreneurial Impact with myself, Joe Martin, and my distinguished guest, Marcus Green. And I can't actually do it justice for all the things that Marcus does, from not only running real estate teams to development to title to mortgage. So, Marcus, what do you do? Where do you operate business at before we really kick into the meat this discussion today?
Awesome. I mean, well, number one, thanks for having me on. I think the world of you, and I love what you're doing in the community. And it's funny you ask me what I do, because I feel like my wife asks me that question like once a month. She's like, "Wait, what do you do again?" Like when my friends ask me what you do, what do I say? Like you said, I have my finger in a lot of things, but I really consider myself a serial entrepreneur. I love building businesses. I love leading people. As you mentioned, I have a lot of things in the real estate space: my real estate team, property management, development company, title company, mortgage company. And then I also spend a lot of time coaching through my platform and my podcast, The Whole Enchilada.
Which will definitely cross promote through this whole thing. So I had the pleasure of being able to be your guest a couple of weeks ago on that and The Whole Enchilada. Yeah. So that was an awesome discussion in regards to just like business and thought process of the first quarter. So if you haven't listened to that one,
I got great feedback on that conversation. It was a fun one.
I had a whole lot. And you got me on a day I was rolling with just ideas coming out. So I'm sure that kind of blew some people's minds.
Well, I'm counting on you rolling today with some good ideas.
Well, I think this one's interesting. So what I'm really excited about today is just like your entrepreneurial nature, just through all the different businesses and the energy that you bring to everything that you touch. And it's really doesn't actually draw. I mean, yeah, there's business and you have to have margin in order to have impact in business. But every one of the times I've engaged with you around the impact that your businesses have is always around some type of experience or some type of transitioning and making somebody's life better, whether it's personal or professional. So in the lane of entrepreneurial impact, I would love to talk to you, because like one of the best conversations we've ever had was like your different way of thinking about lead generation in the real estate business. Because I think in my 12 years of real estate, lead gen has always been like the thing we know we have to do, but it's always been something that agents and brokers have always kind of shied away from, because it's not necessarily scalable, because it's driven by the individual person and their skill sets in regards to their sphere of influence, but also their mindset on what they want to do. So could you just go into like how you see the future of lead gen when it comes to agents and brokers? Because I think it's a really let's start there and then we can kind of get into the weeds.
Yeah. I'd love to give you some of my thoughts on this, and please jump in, because I'd love to get your take on some of this, because I tend to be an outside of the box thinker.
Which I love, by the way. That's why I want you on here. I want you to blow things up and get people pissed off and be like, yeah, just cause some turmoil.
Yeah, and sometimes that serves me really well, and sometimes it helps me think through things that I shouldn't do, right? So I'm interested to get some of your take on this, because lead generation, a lot of people are looking for the magic button in business right now, particularly the real estate businesses. They know our industry's changed, the market's changed, so they're thinking, what is the new magic button? So one thing I think is really important to start with is I think principally there isn't a new. It still is about lead generation and connecting with people. There is some newness to what message to deliver, how to deliver it. And more importantly, the thing I think a lot of people miss is there's a completely new way the consumer wants to receive information. So lead generation still is in fact, it's a more critical piece of business now than it's ever been. And we have to do it a little bit differently, but it's not a completely new concept, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like what I heard you just say, and I want to double click on this one, because I've been really focused in on the consumer experience. What you just said was that lead gen, maybe, and clarify if I'm wrong, what you just said is that the new way of lead gen is actually to think about how the consumer experiences your outreach.
That's right. Yeah, and so it's interesting. Whenever I'm answering, approaching a new problem, I always try to take it all the way back to the root. Where's the root piece of this? Because it's really, in my opinion, solving a lead generation problem. You can't solve that problem until you work it back to a root of what did the consumer wake up worried about today, and how are they approaching solving that problem. And so where my mind goes to first solve this problem is really thinking through consumer behaviors and consumer patterns, decision making. And so there's some parallels to how the consumer made decisions 5-10 years ago versus how they're making decisions today. And you can't take the same lead generation scripting and tactics from 5 years ago that worked well for you, because the consumer will receive them differently based on where their mindset's at today. And I've got some examples and thoughts around that I'd love to run by you to kind of think through that behavior pattern, because I think getting some clarity on that, then we can say, now we know how they're thinking and how they're approaching problem solving. Then you get into the lead generation conversation to be like, where do I meet them where they're at, and how do I be the solution to their problem? Does that make sense?
I think it makes a ton of sense. So I think what you're saying is the first place that we have to like anchor people to is the current environment for the demands of what the consumer is experiencing.
Yep. On my computer in my home office, I've got a little sticky note that kind of resonates with me that's in relation to this is I have a little sticky note every morning that I look at that says, who needs my A game? And it kind of picks me up to say like, okay, well, it's not about what I need to get done or what I want to get done today. Is there's people in my world that need the best version of me. And that does two things for me. One is it encourages me to say, am I the solution in today's market? Like, what am I doing today to be on my A game so that I can be the solution for other people? And then it also encourages me to do the activities, because anyone that tells me they love lead gen is probably lying. It's like the person that tells you they don't like bacon. Like, it's just not true, right? And so the idea behind it's not that I love picking up the phone, but I do love helping people. If I have the idea that someone's sitting in a stupor somewhere needing what I have, that triggers me to pick up the phone, right? And so here's a couple of thoughts I want to run by you from how the consumer used to make decisions versus how they make decisions now. And if I get too far off what you want to talk about today,
I love it. Hey, I just think it gets people like, I love this, Marcus, is just that it could be so off the wall, because right now we're sitting in this weird settlement has been fully accepted by the judge and jury. And we know that in July there's going to be changes in like compensation, which means we have to think differently about our value proposition, which means you have to actually think about, how do I put myself in what you're actually just about to kick off, is what does the consumer need? And if you don't actually think about the consumer's best like needs at this moment in time, you'll eventually be taken out of business. So I think it's a great conversation to go down. So
cool. I'm excited to flesh it out with you. And I feel a need to say it. I'm going to say it is, I'm going to oversimplify some things. So hopefully they don't come across as like too brash or direct on how it used to be versus now. But for the point of time and just making points, I'm going to be pretty direct on it. So, for example, like early on in my career, I didn't know that much. I'm not the smartest guy out there. I do a lot of time studying, but the old way that I think people used to make the decision is I knew I just had to be the most likable, charismatic person out there, because if they liked me, there was a lot of grace on what I brought to the table from a value standpoint. And so that's one point I think that is shifted significantly. Is before, I knew if I could go to a listing consultation, even against somebody that sold way more houses than I did, if they liked me and we jived and I made them feel good and we were moving along, they were going to use me, right?
Energy, literally just energy.
Yeah. And I still think that plays a role in it, but not the same way. So like, here's a couple just thoughts I had. And it was interesting as I saw some of the things you want to talk about. I pulled up some of my old notes on this. One is I think the old way is decisions were based a lot on, a relationship was built on likability and charisma. I feel like the consumer used to not do a lot of research before they got with me. It was like, oh, well, he's coming to bring me the information and he's going to kind of guide me into the decision in that moment. That's not the case anymore either.
That is 100% spot on. Like, this is the old way of thinking, is that my value as the agent is I hoarded all the information. And my only value was that you didn't have this information, and you couldn't be more spot on.
Yeah, and I think you still have to be likable to some extent, but I feel like I could beat out a more charismatic, better looking person than me because if I go to that meeting now, they've already got some element of a pre-decision on what they believe to be true. They've done some research, they've gathered information, both in search, but also just there's so much information flying around on social media and TikTok and all these things that they're absorbing information over time, that they're drawing some element of a conclusion before you even get there. And so part of a new sales technique you have to learn is not to tell them where they're wrong, but to guide them through a self-discovery process of what portion of their reality is true and what portion of it is not.
Have you read The Challenger Sale?
No, I have not.
Oh, you need to write this one down. So anybody listening, I actually gave this to your brother when we were in Austin together. I sent him this because what you're bringing up is there's a statistic that 60% of customers have already made up their decision on their purchase or their choice before they even get to you. So if they've already made
Yep.
60% of the like choice in the sale, like you have a lot of like backwards work to do to unlock their preconceived notions. So the real thought is exactly what you bring up is I can't change what your choice is right now or your thoughts are today, but I can reframe information that you don't have to show the impact of how that could actually affect your choice, but you didn't actually know about it.
That's right. The thing I'm finding though right now is with the right questions, the one thing I do like about this market is they're open to admitting they're living in some element of uncertainty, where the market wasn't that hard to figure out 3-4 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, when it was just like everything was going up and everyone was an expert. So if you approach it in a way of asking the right questions, they're open to reshifting their mindset more than they have been, but they are looking for the upfront, tell me more about that. Why do you believe that? If that's true, what does that do for you and your family? Those type of questions. And then, because the way I think a lot in systems, if they're sitting in whatever they're saying out of their mouth in their moment is a reality to them, is if it's not in alignment with what I believe to be a reality for them as a professional, my job is to ask the right questions to get them back into a place of acknowledging that what they just said was a perception. It's their perceived reality, not their reality. If they get to a place of saying, I guess that's my perception, now I get to be the expert and inject some new information to guide them to a new reality. Once we get our realities in alignment, now we have to work together.
Yeah. You're like, so everybody listening, what Marcus is really talking about is cognitive dissonance. So he basically has to create enough space between perceived reality and logical reality for them to see that their perceived reality is not actually real.
Yeah, and I think a lot of salespeople in our industry you have to work to increase your skill set around selling, because it's charisma, isn't it? Because I think a lot of us would be like, oh, you're wrong, I'm the expert, this is what's right. It's you have to create some space for them to be open to those new ideas to create that new reality.
It's funny you bring that one up. There was this, I forget where I saw this, but they said this quote like really hit is that selling is no longer about the perfect script or the perfect word. It's about a curated experience.
I think that to me is one of the bullet points I put in to the difference between the old way and the new. I think the old way is they had some preconceived notions of the service they wanted, and they don't want just a service anymore. They want an experience. And so I think from a value standpoint, we need to be thinking through am I here to offer this person a service, or am I here to offer this person an experience, which is a personalized, tailored service that creates an experience for this person. It sounds like I'm saying similar words, but it's different in the mind of the consumer today.
I 100% on. I completely agree, because you think about it, the other difference part too is that when you're selling a service or a product, you end up losing the relationship, because now that service or product has been fulfilled, there's no need for you anymore. But if you create an experience, there's other touch points and other service needs that actually are withdrawn from that experience, which allows you to stay in relationship as a person of value throughout the whole home ownership process. And like also manage home when they're actually living in it.
Yep, that's right. Another thing I think that shifted is I think historically the consumer, like let's say that both you and I were trying to get the same listing or the same business, the consumer already had a decision in their mind, because we were both real estate agents, that what we offered was the same. And so it was a lot about just the likability, the charisma, because in essence, what we brought to the table from a value standpoint in their mind was the same. Where I think today we've got to be overly clear about creating a personalized, tailored experience and almost a pricing strategy to offer that, to be like, I'm not here to tell you exactly what you should do. I'm here to discover together what you need.
Yeah.
And here's how I'm going to personally tailor this experience for you and your family to get where you want to go.
I would agree. I'd 100% agree with that, because that's what's going to separate the difference between like the limiting listing services or limiting buying services compared to a full on like experience throughout the home ownership. And I think we can see this is that you can make money and have a sustainable business in real estate if you create that experience for the consumer where they don't feel like it's just a commodity.
Yep. And then the last point I made on this, then we can shift to some into the value and lead generation piece. But another big shift that I think is a hard one for a lot of agents to put their brain around is because it takes some element of putting ego away, is historically the client wanted me to be the hero. They wanted me to come in and be like, oh my gosh, so glad you're here. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you facilitated the sale. Oh my gosh, I needed you to do this. And they no longer want somebody else to be the hero in their story. The person they want to be the hero in their story is them. Mm-hmm. And so now I can't show up and say, oh, you guys are lucky I'm here. I'm the hero. I'm going to fix this problem. If you think about the best movies and stories of all time, you think about the character that's not the hero, but he's the one that facilitates the hero. Think about Yoda to Luke Skywalker. You think about Dumbledore to Harry Potter. You think about Haymitch to Katniss. That's the role that we got. Not with Haymitch. I'm not saying go be a drunk, crazy person, but you see the point I'm making is the way we show up should be about at the closing table. The client should be sitting 6 feet tall, being like, I'm the hero in this story. Look what I was able to facilitate as part of my story. And we're the person saying, we guided you through this process. We helped you do this.
It's so, like, I've never even thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense because think about that. If the behavior of the customer now is that they've done 60% of the work on their choices and data and all this kind of information, you can't go in and try to change, because if I go in and try to tell them that they're wrong, like I'm just going to kill any type of relationship. So you're right. This is like brilliance. You're basically trying to figure out what's your end goal, and then how do I ask you enough questions and give you enough options that allow you to make these choices so you're empowered, so the validity of that 60% choice actually comes to fruition. Like that's I didn't even think about that. That's awesome.
Well, just to show you how weird how my brain works is just the play on this for a minute is where my brain went around that is if the consumer is the hero and if I'm going to step in and play the role of Yoda, what other character is really important to make a great story? The villain.
Yeah.
Right? You could do the same thing. It's Yoda, Skywalker, Darth Vader, Harry Potter, Dumbledore. I don't dare say his name because right? So in this scenario, a great salesperson, we work through this process of how do I become the guide in a way to make them the hero, and who, or really in this situation, what is the villain that I can show them a path that together we're going to overcome, which the villain is the problem they need solved in their world that makes them the hero. Like if we can take that through the process, now the likelihood of us remaining part of their story beyond the transaction is significant in the form of the next transaction, the referrals, those type of things.
No, that's good, man. So let's I think those are great frameworks for people to see like the old way comes the new way. So what, like if you were to give like 3 things, 4 whatever's on your list, what is the new way of lead gen for people that they need to be thinking about curating?
Yep. Great question. So here's how I think through lead gen. And I think you brought up a really, really important point earlier, saying that I think you used I wrote it down, 60% of people have a pre-decision already made, right? By the time you're getting there, they've made some element of the decision. So I think the strongest form of any effort and energy put into lead gen is better than no lead gen, just to be clear. And I think in today's world, if you can be part of the flow of information well before they need you, it is significantly increases the chance of your lead generation and lead nurturing efforts later. And what I mean by that is, if you think about let's take a step back. If 60% of people came with a pre-decision made, means they were gathering information from somewhere. Right. And it's a combination to some element based on their demographic and age of what they saw on TikTok, what they heard on the news, what they read on MSN.com, and what their nail salon lady told them last week, right? And so the one of the biggest things we should be doing on a day-to-day basis is am I getting enough content out there to enough people that I'm participating in the pre-decision that's being made? Because if I can participate in some level of that pre-decision, my chances of my actual lead generation efforts increase significantly.
Yeah, I would 100% agree that, because you've taken up mind share in the front end. Because now they're saying Marcus is the end all be all in information prior to I even go into the third party networks.
Yep. And then going back to your question, and I can go as deep into my thoughts on some of these things as you want, but this is where our industry has not changed a lot. Is if you haven't built a database of your SOI of people that have some element leaned into your value to some level, that's obviously where you need to start, is leaning into that group. If they're not hearing from you now more than ever, is you've already lost the lowest hanging fruit within your business. So from a magic button standpoint of saying, hey, don't do that lead source, go somewhere else, that's still tried and true. Number one is building your SOI in your database as big and as deep as you can, and then rethinking through some of the content we talk now of what is it they need and how are they thinking now compared to the day they entered my database. Because it's if the name and the contact card inside your database looks the same, the actual human being that's associated with that contact card inside your database is a different person. Yeah. They are a different version, which means they need a new version of you. Are you showing up as the new version to match the new version of them?
Yeah, because I think part of that is what I'm hearing you say is like your level of value has to extend more than just facilitating a contract and access to information on an MLS, that you actually have to shift to a real estate consult. Like if you think about what's going on, like the real estate trade professionally has to increase its overall professionalism to be more considered in alignment of like lawyers and doctors, right? Yeah. Like that's what we need to get to. So how do you position that in your lead gen? So continue, but I think that's like it's an insightful change of how you perceive yourself as a real estate professional, because that's how your market needs to start seeing you as.
Yep. I'd say the second thing, that one of the things I hear a lot from agents, which it cracks me up, is so SOI and database. Second one is I think a lot of people say I use social media for my lead gen, and putting information out and hoping someone connects with you is a really soft form of lead generation. But there's a way to get much deeper in your actual lead generation, and social media is a two-way connection, is not just throwing stuff out there and hoping. It's like, how are you creating engagement through social media? Because for most people, the number of followers that they have on social media does not match the number of people in their database.
Correct.
So I think a big piece of the lead generation game is how do you get the number of people that are following you on social media also into your database, and make that game of how do I make those the same number? And it's minor changes to what you're doing, is going from just putting content out, is how do I create engagement around the content I'm putting out, and creating engagement with their posts and what they're doing, right? So part of your lead generation isn't just putting information out, but it's engaging on what they're doing with the intent of saying, how do I take this from a social conversation to a private conversation, if that makes sense. Like for example, one of the
you're good. I mean, I think you're dead on. I think the way I hear it is you're taking it from like a social media, I threw some stuff out there, and actually curating an experience that becomes a community, so that then your people are interacting with other people that see Marcus or whoever as the professional, the expert. And then because I see that as my value, you've built a tribe.
Yeah. And so just to give you an example on that, it's okay. Let's say I took a screenshot of us talking right now, and I posted it on my social media saying, hey, I had an opportunity to talk to another real estate professional, top in his game, in his market. Great conversation. I told an important story there. I told a story that I'm also a top real estate professional in my industry, is what I did there. And most agents would pat themselves on the back and be done there. But what if someone commented on my page of like, oh, that's awesome, love to see you doing that. If I don't respond to that, then I didn't really engage back. I didn't create a conversation. It's not two-way. It's a there, back there again. Right. And then I can go even deeper I can comment on and say, hey, thanks, Sally. I appreciate the support. Then I can take it even deeper by now going to private messaging in social media or texting and saying, hey, Sally, I wanted to take this conversation private. I haven't connected with you in a while. How's Bob? Right? So it's the same trigger, same start of the lead generation, but am I going deep enough to actually go from I'm here if you need me to we're in conversation?
Yeah, I love that. Like, I think it's huge because now it's actually, you're not a number. There's not a number on your head anymore. It's like an actual live person.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that's such an easy format of lead generation because it's not, you're wasting zero time on ringing, right? You're not, and we know what all of us do when the phone's ringing, like, please don't pick up, please don't pick up, please don't pick up, so I can leave a message, right? Nobody listens to their voice messages anymore, right? So it's a very powerful and simple way to increase your lead generation efforts. For me, any conversation I have with somebody, regardless of the format of conversation, I always walk into it with 3 preset objectives. Number 1 is, do they have an immediate need for me? So even in social media, phone call, email, do they have a need right now where they're already in that pre-decision mode, right? The chances are the majority, 80-something% of the people I talk to don't have a need to have a listing appointment or buyer consultation with me right now. So that's when I move into the second preset objective for me is, can I get them into a pattern of yes? Can I give them some element of value that they can appreciate right now? So I've always got something in my back pocket. An example that I use on that to illustrate would be, because I do a lot of investor transactions in Arizona, right? So if someone doesn't need me now, I can say, hey, real quick before I let you go, I recently wrote an article about the 3 biggest mistakes investors are making in the market right now. Would it be okay if I sent that over to you? Mm-hmm. So now I've got a value piece that illustrates that I'm a pro again, right? I recently wrote an article, which makes it sound like it's published all over the place, even though it might only be published on my blog. And it is valid information they want to know, and they're going to give me a yes. Oh yeah, would you please send that over to me? Great. Now I know what the next conversation is going to be is, hey, did you get a chance to read that article? Anything I can do to help you with that? But it gets them into a pattern of yes. Mm-hmm. The third preset objective is always a referral for me. And people struggle asking for a referral, particularly if someone says, I don't need you right now. It's hard to say, well, who do you know that does? But that step number 2 gives me the ability to ask for a referral real easy, to say, hey, Joe, I know, I'll send that article over right now, but Joe, I know you're a really savvy real estate investor. And one thing I've learned about real estate investors is they rub shoulders with other investors often. Who do you know that also owns property here in the Phoenix Valley that would find value in that same article? Can I get a 3-way text started? You can introduce me to them. So, like, no matter what lead generation strategy I'm doing, we're always running through those 3 preset objectives. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think, and also, like, to go back on your call to action, you basically made a call to action on the referral. How do you weave that into your social media too? Instead of going back to your point of like, hey, maybe I've got an article of value. If you want that, send this. And I've seen these people do that in their body, their social posts. Like, hey, if you want more information, send this or post this, because it's driving up the activity on it. So, Marcus, if you were to like bottom line old to new ways of like lead generation, what's the one thing to take away from like this discussion between the two so that someone can go take action like right now?
People might think I'm oversimplifying it, but here's, if I had to give a one-liner advice on how to approach your lead generation right now, is number 1 is I'd say get your journal out and ask yourself the question, are you really the solution that your people need right now? Because if you're not, your lead generation efforts aren't going to be impactful. So number 1 is, am I really understanding who my people are, and do I have the value proposition, and am I the solution right now? If the answer to that is yes, then it's double down on your database and increase your skill set to build those relationships. Because for most of us, the people in your database is enough to hit your goals this year. And then if it's not, I would look at your social media to say, how do I get my social media contacts to become, I'm using air quotation, friends to real friends, like real connections of value. And then third is, now it's saying, how do I get in front of new people to work through this funnel to get into my database? And a lot of that happens by what we talked about before, of just you become the expert in your market and get as much information as you can out there. And you need to make some noise right now. Noisy people get heard. Just make sure your noise is in alignment with who you're really targeting. Get over clarity on who your ideal person is. Don't be over neutral on it. And you will find that those people line up the more clear your message is in alignment with who you're going after.
Love it. So Marcus, first off, I want to say thank you for like your time pouring into this channel here. So those of you who haven't followed his podcast is the Whole Enchilada. Give it a like, give it a follow. Just like if you're listening to us, if you get value, no, rather, I know you got value on this call today. So because you got value, give us a like, give us a follow, share it out with your people, and tune into next week's episode of Entrepreneurial Impact.